Extra today. My name is Uganda Semakola Ziksoka. It is the 21st of this month of 2020, month of February 2022. And welcome. Thank you so much for choosing to be with us on another very cold Monday morning. But here is where we are today. Well, picking it up from where Chirabo Nyonyintono left it, and the team of the GMU Sports, Ruben Impima, Chivirango, now to our last segment of Good Morning Uganda here on UBC TV. And joining me in studios are two very important guests and Lego brains. To start with is Dr. Sylvia Nambiru Mukasa, the Chief Executive Officer of LapsNet. You're very welcome, Dr. Sylvia Nambiru.
Thank you, Mr. Jagenda.
I am happy to have you in studios this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, together with Dr. Sylvia Nambiru is Comrade Ndugu Gawaya Tegule from the Network of Public Interest Lawyers and a social justice lawyer. You're also very welcome, Ndugu Comrade Tegule.
Thank you, Jagenda.
I am really happy to have you here this morning.
The pleasure is all mine.
I don't remember when I last sat on set with you.
It's been long.
Many years ago.
But UBC will always be another home away from home for me.
Okay, yeah. I am happy to have you. Many people, actually, who find me, wherever they find me, they at times call me Gawaya Tegule. What's common between me and you?
The hair.
The hair. But I'm happy to have you. Thank you so much for allowing to join us on Good Morning Uganda today. And I will start with you, Dr. Sylvia. Yes. We are talking about the World Day of Social Justice. I think this was on the 20th, which was yesterday.
Yes.
And here is where we are today. But before we get into the issues of the day itself, let's get to what you represent, LapsNet. What is it and what does it do?
Yes.
LapsNet, not
yes.
Laps. Okay, well, yes. Thank you very much.
I think we've lapsed.
No, it's Laps. LapsNet, not LapsNet. Well,
yes. Thank you so much once again, Jagenda, for giving LapsNet this opportunity to be in UBC studio.
Good.
And it's an opportunity to speak about LapsNet. Yesterday we were celebrating the Social Justice Day, World Social Justice Day, and LapsNet comes into play with that because of the work we do. We are a network of public interest lawyers or legal aid service providers. It brings about 54 organizations in Uganda that provide, non-government organizations, that provide legal services to the poor and vulnerable. In a way to strengthen them to have fair representation when they have disputes before courts of law or within the community, and promoting justice. Especially for those that are most vulnerable.
Okay.
So our work mainly as a network is that we coordinate those lawyers and the organizations to ensure that they provide quality services, and also to alert them where there is that kind of need. Then we do a lot of advocacy, which is informed by research. So when we do research, we use that information to ensure that we probe and also lobby the government of Uganda and the policy makers to strengthen the laws, to strengthen the practices, especially in the delivery of justice in Uganda. And basically that is the work we do as a network.
Well, that's very good.
Yes.
To you, Dr. Ndugu Tegule, let's talk about your role as a network of public interest lawyers. How do you come into LapsNet?
It's because LapsNet is an umbrella organization. It's a membership organization. So you have a lot of civil society organizations that are under LapsNet. But what draws us together is one, the public interest. Articulating the public interest in the legal arena, representing people who cannot afford legal representation, standing up for the defense of human rights. Going to the courts of law to provide or to engage in strategic litigation. Strategic litigation is that kind of litigation that is basically broad and aimed at making strategic interventions in the social justice spectrum by the courts of law pronouncing themselves on particular aspects of what is happening in our society. Say this is not right, this must be changed, we recommend this and that. That is a lot of what we do. So it's a lot of work in the sense that every time especially in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a lot of market for people like us in the sense of human rights are most of the time played down. They're a lot of the time abused by those in power. And therefore, every time you have that, then it means that you create an automatic market for human rights lawyers. So that is our business.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, when we talk about public interest litigation, it looks too much of or more so a free service that is rendered, a pro bono issue. And majority of the people think that when you get into legal aid, you've come into business where you're supposed to make money. People are trading with titles and doing all the things, land, criminal, stuff like that. But when you talk about public interest litigation, is that concept being understood in this country of Uganda when we talk about public interest lawyers or litigation?
That concept is not yet fully understood. Excuse me. I think Justice Lillian Tivatemwa, yes, of the Supreme Court, I think she had an interpretation of public interest litigation, which I do not like, which I do not agree with. I think she made it very, very narrow. I think we need to bring this conversation to make sure that people understand what the public interest is. I'm talking about that particular decision. I forget the case, by the way, but I think it comes to the issue of every time you go to court and you lose a case, then we say in law that costs follow the event. The winner must be paid. Now, if you lose in a public interest case, then the question comes,
who pays?
Who pays?
Because it's public interest.
It's public interest. And I think that is where that's where I think the Justice Tivatemwa decision came in, because then you're forcing people to pay because they've lost a case and say, but this is not a public interest case. So she gave an interpretation of public interest, which I thought needs to be revised, because we need to interpret this thing broadly and liberally, that every time a citizen feels there is a cause that the courts must look at and consider and interpret and make declarations, and this particular case or cause of action goes beyond his own interest, it is for the broader good, then to me that should qualify as public interest, because you look at yourself, you're saying, no, we think this is what is good for the country. The courts must not punish people for going there in the public interest, because I think we had an issue with
just like they're not rewarded at times. They're not rewarded. You're not rewarded in most cases,
yes,
as a lawyer.
In most cases they're not rewarded either. And sometimes, and let me tell you, when you go to court, you're not looking for a reward. The reward is the decision you get from the court. You're saying, let them pay me costs and what have you. Sometimes costs may be there, but for me, and I think our approach now, the current approach now as public interest lawyers, is that you say let every party bear its own costs, because this is a strictly public interest issue. We don't want to gain from it, although I think the more progressive jurisprudence is that if it's a public interest case, then if the litigant loses, the plaintiff or the petitioner loses, they should not pay costs, because this is a public interest matter. But if the government wins, they should not be allowed to benefit from that. I mean, how do you pay costs to the Attorney General? I think most.
How do you pay costs to government?
Yes, to government, because already we're paying taxes. So it's like you're paying double. We pay our taxes. So government should never recover costs in these cases, no matter how frivolous they may seem. I think many courts are now saying, in other jurisdictions, saying, no, government is government. You cannot, Attorney General cannot recover costs. But the issue is that either each party bears its own costs, or government pays the costs, depending on the case. Ideally, it's the discretion of the court. But I think that our interpretation of public interest litigation needs to be broadened in this country. That's, I think, an area where we need to argue more that the courts must recognize it for what it is, especially in these days where many of us think that the country has taken a direction in terms of human rights that is not right. So it means that we shall have more cases, and you'll see them. There are more cases that are coming up. In the next few weeks, you'll see maybe about a dozen cases filed in the human rights arena. And we hope that the courts will understand that we're doing this in the public interest. We don't seek to benefit from it. And like a lot of the time you said, the issue of making money, we don't make money from these cases. A lot of the time that Sylvia will call us and say, guys, there's an issue here. Sometimes you won't even bother to say, now, who is going to pay for that? If they tell you that Gundi has been arrested, you're going to dash there. without asking, where's my fuel, where's whatever. You just say, we must get that person out of jail. It's about the passion you have. It's about the interest you have, the love you have for human rights, the love you have for fellow citizens, and the fact that you have the country at heart.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Sylvia?
I just wanted to add on, just to clarify for someone ordinarily listening. A public interest intends to get a remedy from court that is going to impact on many of the people that may not ideally have noticed that they were having a violation. I'll give you an example. When Uganda Law Society went to court and challenged the trial of civilians in court martial, that was intended to stop civilians being tried. Yes. And the case of Bujingo and Malay, going to court when Malay is not an aggrieved party, is not a Teddy, that is a public interest. Someone goes to court to try and correct some error that is intended to affect
You
them.
go to court because of Dongo giveaway?
Yes,
the first giveaway, something like that?
Yes, because you know this is going to affect the future, now and the future. And you want the court to stop that anomaly using the law. That is public interest.
Thank you. Now let's talk social justice, because the day, World Day of Social Justice, was just ready. How did it begin, and how did we even come into that equation as Uganda, for example?
Okay, it is the World Social Justice Day is an international day, and it is recognized under UN, and it is celebrated every 20th day of February. So social justice comes because of history. Right now, the theme is history and significance. You look at this history and its significance today. It comes as a result of the world realizing that there is those people that are going through a lot of untold suffering or inequality that you need to address together as governments, as policymakers, to ensure that we commit to improving the lives of those people. And partly, you look at issues like inequality in gender, you look at issues poverty, you look at issues of human rights, exclusion. So all those areas of life, you look at them and you begin to say, what is missing? What is the missing link that we need to address? And when we speak about social justice today, more than ever, look at the COVID pandemic. It exposed us to inequalities. For example, if I may speak nearer here in Uganda, you realize how people were dying because of lack of health, access to health facilities. And many could not afford the exorbitant prices. Look at gender-based violence as a result of people keeping in homes. The homes of where people are poor suffered most. When you go and ask and you begin to tag and see the children that got pregnant, the children that got married off, the many women that suffered because of poverty, you again realize that it's because of inequality. So these days come to remind us to look at our history, look at what we've done, and what we need to do better. The issue of human rights, as Councillor Tegule has been mentioning it, came in more visible during the COVID period, where people, even not putting on a mask became an issue. The courts closed, and many people, the local defense were whipped by local defense, and they could not afford even to go to court on their own without any lawyer representing them. So when we are speaking about social justice, look at it from the economic, social, political, or whatever, wholesomely, of the people. Or the humanity across the world.
Ndugu Tegule, and I think she's made a very good submission here, Dr. Sylvia, but can we achieve a socially justice, a society that is a justice society, by and by, or having that society? Looking at the cultures, for example, that we have, we living in situations where we live in communities that are patriarchal in a way. And she just talked about domestic violence, she just talked about quite a number of things. Even when we advocate for social justice, but is that something that can be achieved in Uganda or elsewhere in the world?
I think philosophers talk about two things: a destination and then a journey. I want to look at social justice as our vision, but you see, the vision has a journey leading to it. And I think the most critical part of all this is the journey. Some things we may not see in our lifetime, but to us, what is important is the journey gets underway, the journey continues, the journey continues unhindered, that every obstacle that we identify, we're able to circumvent it or to go through it or around it or over it or whatever it is, or to throw it, kick it out of the window. This is a journey. It will take time, but we must continue moving. We cannot say there will be a time when everything will be perfect. Sounds like you're talking about heaven.
Utopia.
I prefer to talk about heaven rather than utopia, because utopia is unreal. But heaven is real.
Heaven is real.
Heaven is real. And hell is real. And we were saying that it is possible for us to get to a point where it may not be possible for us to get to a point where everything is perfect. But there is a standard. There is a standard we must pursue, and we hope that in our lifetime we can see that standard. We're not saying to be perfect 100%, but there is a standard. And what is critical now for us as Uganda is there a journey? Are we taking the right steps? Are we moving in the right direction? And are we moving, or is there some kind of inertia? As long as we're moving, we say that's progress.
What is failing us as a country? Because from what you are submitting, both of you here, you notice that we've tried to put up a few measures in here. We have GILOS, we have now this organization, we have quite a number of those. Several legal aid affairs, the judiciary, we've put up courts at all levels, family courts, we've put up courts for civil issues, land division, etc., etc. All the things are intended to actually give us what we're talking about. What is failing us? What aren't we doing right? Because we've normally said there are so many laws in Uganda, and the problem is actually not legislation. We've virtually legislated everything on everything. There are laws here. If you decided to get into our laws of Uganda, you could have a law on each and everything. What is failing us that we're not achieving what we should be achieving in that social justice arena?
No, I think our biggest problem is the political will. I think that this government needs to do more in terms of human rights. This government needs to do more in terms of being people-centered. I think the president especially needs to be, I wish we were here with him, because this would be his message. I think he needs to do more in terms of building a people-centered government, in terms of having people-centered policies, in terms of being able to respect the policies that they come up with as government. I think there's room for improvement there. In terms of being able to respect the law and rule of law, I think, like you say, we have the right laws, we have the right policies, but the implementation is very, very poor. And I think that the way Uganda is organized and the way that power is exercised in this country, a lot of it is centered around the president. So for now, I would suggest to His Excellency that he needs to do more. He needs to show more interest in the people. He needs to show more interest in the country, in the good of the country. He needs to show more interest in the public interest, to say there are things we must do, not because we feel like doing them, but because public interest demands so, because the future of the country demands so, because the sustainability of democracy demands so, because if we don't do them, we're setting a bad precedent. So I would want to tell His Excellency that a lot of what we see happening points to lack of political will. And every time we say political in this country, we mean presidential will. It means that he really needs to come in and do much more. I think it's going to be 78 this year, or maybe 79. He's no longer young. He must be looking at leaving a legacy that is respectable, a legacy that will keep the country going. I think a lot of what we see suggests that the country is moving in the wrong direction. That respect for the law is not there anymore. And if you look at the highest levels of this country, the respect for law is not there anymore. That's why we have things like Gamba Nogu. They stop you at the traffic whatever, or at a checkpoint, and so you don't have this, say, don't waste my time. You call a number and say, you talk to this guy here. And then when you talk to the guy on the phone, he says, Gwe, leave my boy alone now, now, now. And the poor policeman now just cringe in fear, or whoever it is. That shows a culture of lack of respect for the rule of law. And you cannot run a country like that. So if you talk about the biggest problem we're facing, I think that is where the efforts need to be focused. If we have the president singing the right song, everything else will fall into place. He wields a lot of power in this country. He's the most powerful individual in this country. He's powerful than every institution of the country put together. If he were to just make the right sound bites, you'd see things going so in this country. The president therefore becomes like the inner lining of the cloth. If you want to straighten this tie, no matter how much you iron the top, as long as the inner lining is twisted and crumpled, the tie will never be straight. So the president is that inner lining of this tie, if this tie is the country, that needs to be straightened. Once he gets his act together, believe you me, everything will fall into place. Like our fathers used to say, and I say this with care, delicately and with respect to those who may have the problem, if the head of the household has a hunchback, then every member of the family will walk with a stoop, because they see how the paterfamilias works, and they subconsciously or unconsciously they fall along. It just happens. We need the president to come out and steer us in the right direction, and everything will be okay.
Sylvia, yes, what needs to be done right?
What needs to be done right is definitely going back to the drawing board and appreciating and understanding what social justice means to you as an individual, to the people you are leading in your respective dockets, and to the country as a whole. Social justice means that we need to look at the basic needs of the society. We need to look at the social security in terms of food, in terms of health, in terms of education. But then we need to know that we need to empower the rights holders. He's talking about the presidency, but I'm also speaking about the rights holders. How much are how much have we empowered the ordinary person on the street, the ordinary woman in the market, to know and demand what that person needs as services for them to be able to flourish? How much are they going to demand? And when they demand those rights, what is the framework we have put in place to enable them access those rights and be able to get the food they need, the quality food, the health services? So we have come to a situation where social justice people are what we would call like there is power over, and there is also lack of agency. People have come to be like government yetu yambe. Everything is all about the government should help us. In other words, they become beggars. Instead of saying, should the government do this? There is no well here. We know that money was sent to construct a borehole. What happened?
Exactly.
Who was responsible? So that the people begin to ask those hard questions and saying, when will the Honorable Nabanja come here for a myoga? So the handout mentality is affecting the Ugandans. I'm speaking here where we are best known, because all the time they are expecting. And we need people to begin to know that they are entitled by constitution to have those particular rights and services. They are also having these service providers, whether they are doctors, whether they are lawyers, whether they are judicial officers, and they are supposed to serve them.
Okay. I think you've made a very good point, just like Andugu Tegbule here says. Now, much as we put the blame, or we center, we take the burden back to the political will. And like Tegbule says, when you talk about political will in this country, you actually talk about the presidential will. But of course, let's also talk about the duty bearers. Now, a whole chapter, not a chapter, but an article in the Constitution of Uganda talks about responsibilities or duties of the citizens. We normally tend to push for their rights. They have the right to do this or that, but then their responsibilities also. Does it also, isn't that clash that also now causes a social injustice? That on one end, we're trying to advocate for our rights, and then on the other end, we're actually negating our responsibilities. Isn't that what is causing the clash, the social injustice?
Definitely, the boat has to be balanced. We need to have the rights on the other side and the rights holders on this side. But in middle there, we have also the responsibilities. The rights holders have their responsibilities, but also the duty bearers also have their responsibilities. However, before the rights holders begin to do their responsibilities, they need to trust and believe in the duty, or the givers, or the service providers. So the challenge comes, and this is what we are seeing right now when it comes to social justice, that people have given up. They don't know what to do and how to do it. Police is not observing the law. Actually, all the security officers are becoming lawless. And when they come to the people are already tired. Let's speak today about what's going on social media. And we are terming the young people, or the people who are using social media, as abusing the media and abusing that platform, and they have been labeled lumpens. But who is making these lumpens? The society is making the lumpens. The youth are demanding for employment. They can't get the employment. The students are dropping out of school. Everyone is like on their own. At the end of the day, if you're the father, you don't do what you're supposed to do in your house, don't expect the children to respect you as a father. You know, respect is earned. So as we are seated here and we are demanding, let them speak well, let them talk to us well, have we really earned that respect as elders or those that are supposed to give the services? The corruption is at its height. And people are seeing that every coin that comes in, whether as donation, whether as taxes, it is going to things which are not priority. They are going to hospitals and they're not finding medication. We are in schools and the fees are exorbitantly uncontrolled. So when they look at what they are paying, the roads are potholes in most of the areas. So when people look at what they have put in and what they are receiving, it is not equivalent. And as a result, they lose it. So you realize that even they forget their responsibilities. When they are arrested, they know that now I'm going to be put into a drone and I'm going to disappear. So they raise noise before they disappear. Instead of complying and say, okay, Afande, arrest me, I'm here. The person coming to arrest has not identified themselves. What they do is they struggle. And as a result, there is a scuffle. So we need to contextualize the situation right now. Vis-a-vis, we need to go back to the drawing board. The political will, the leadership will, the responsibility. Let people be doing for the members of parliament. Let them do what people expect them to do. The people will respect them and they will receive and they will begin to listen. They will refuse to be big-headed.
We'll just take a very short break and return. After continuing the conversation with me in studios is Dr. Sylvia Nambiru Mukasa, the Chief Executive of Last Night, and Ndugu lawyer Gawaya Tegule from the Network of Public Interest Lawyers. Talk about the World Day of Social Justice. We'll take a break and return shortly.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Raising voices.
As a community member, I think we need to change the way we act in response to violence against children. In my small way, I can be a leader in preventing violence in my community. I promise to work with my neighbors to create violence-free homes and communities for our children.
In this time of COVID, what is your promise to the children of Uganda? Because a violence-free childhood is everyone's right. Raising voices.
Are your children ready to learn? Schools are open. As parents and guardians, it is your duty to ensure that your children go back to school. COVID-19 prevention measures have been put in place to keep students safe as they go back to school. Not only do teachers prioritize everyone's health, including their own, but they discourage violence among students. They also ensure that students follow SOPs. Any concerns are reported to a school administrator or senior woman or man teacher for correction and further guidance. Dear parents and guardians, you too must play your role. Ensure your children always maintain a 2-meter distance from others, avoid crowded places, regularly wash their hands with soap and water, and wear a washed and clean face mask that covers their mouths and noses. Please keep your children at home if they're feeling sick, and take note. In our effort to keep students safe, there are no visitation days or any other school visits allowed. Let's share knowledge, not COVID-19. This message is supported by the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education and Sports, and UNICEF. Stay safe.
Start your day bright and early with Good Morning Bundles from Airtel. That's right. Enjoy brighter days with 2 GB at 5,000 shillings, valid for 24 hours. Join that morning agent meeting. Close that online business deal. Catch up with loved ones. Do it all with the most affordable data bundles. Dial *175# to buy Good Morning Bundles from 12 a.m. to 11:59 a.m. and enjoy 2 GB, valid for 24 hours from time of purchase. Good Morning Bundles for the best day ahead with Airtel, the smartphone network.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Well, thank you very much and welcome back from the break. My name is Jaganda Semakola Ziksoka. We continue. My guests in studios are Dr. Sylvia Nambiru Mukasa, the Chief Executive of LASP Night, and Ndugu Tegule Gawaya from the Network of Public Interest Lawyers. And here is where we are. Tegule, we took a break after hearing some submission from Dr. Sylvia here. And she talked about something called corruption, which I think is one of the undoings of social justice in this country. And I think corruption is an equalizer to all of us, that we all get into bed with corruption at some point, at some time. And when it comes to corruption, we forget our religions, we forget our cultures, we forget our political affiliations, we forget each and everything actually that puts us aside, and we get to that. The issue of corruption, with the corruption that we have, the biting corruption in this country, can it help us? Can we achieve social justice for all the good things that you're talking about, with the corruption still with us here?
No, corruption becomes a problem everywhere it goes. And I think our problem is that, again, it points to the political will that we do not think we have. I don't think we have political will in this country to fight corruption. Because, you see, we talk about corruption at two levels, broadly. There's what we call bureaucratic corruption. You find a traffic policeman who is, you don't have a third-party sticker, so yes, he wants to give you a ticket, and you say, no, kankwe mtwalo. He says, fine, so he give him mtwalo. Because you're rushing to come here? Yes, whatever, there's, so everybody's happy. He has 10K in his pocket, you've survived the fine, so you could have paid 50, you're paying 10. So, but we usually call that corruption of need. That you find this guy is just, he hasn't even had breakfast, he has no lunch, his kids are at home. And you also want to run and go away. Yes. You also want to run and go. So it's just corruption of need, that there's a need being met. But then there's, I think, the broader corruption which we're talking about is what you call the corruption of greed, or the grand corruption. And that one is difficult because, you see, you can't satiate greed, you can't satisfy greed. The needs can be met. But you see, corruption of greed means the more you have, the more you want. And I think that is where we're getting it wrong as a country. And as long as we have no will to fight that corruption, we really are wasting our time in many cases. So we need to tackle corruption from the very top. That is where the problems are. We want to see the anti-corruption agencies circling and netting the big fish. Because that is where the problem is, especially in the political circles. That is where the worst corruption is. These are the guys who make billions and billions from it. And that is why many of them, sometimes when you go to these elections, you see guys like, it's like, I must win by hook or crook. It means they know the value of winning an election. They know the value of being in office, because you get opportunity to steal more and more. And that means that an election like that one, where people will do anything. They will do anything to make sure they win. They will steal the ballots, they will bribe the voters, they will even kill their opponents if it means they're going to get to office. And now, if we do not fight that at the highest level, that is in the political space, we really are wasting our time. I think we need to have an honest conversation and say, we've gotten it wrong as a country, we need a fresh start. Corruption, you see, there's a lot. I mean, we could have a show every day discussing corruption without repeating ourselves for 1 year, without ever repeating ourselves, like new information, new angles, new everything, because such a huge subject. But as long as we entertain corruption, as long as we pamper it and feed it, and it keeps growing, many things, many objectives we have as a country will never be achieved. And social justice is one of the things that are impossible to achieve if we are letting corruption thrive. Okay, apart from the human rights, because when we talk about social injustices, we run to human rights, that's very visible to all of us. And of course, we can actually tell that Tegule's rights were violated, Jaganda's rights were violated, etc., etc. But then again, we talk about the inequalities. She talked about that. Come to situations where I am a classroom teacher.
she is a nurse in a hospital, you are a headmaster in some other school or whatever, the way we paid, the peanuts we actually paid, and all the things, and nobody seems to actually be making noise about all the things. We have inequalities in our payment systems. We have all these issues. There is no equality in many of these things. That's why you find Uganda wants to run out of a classroom to actually find his way to Parliament as a member of Parliament, because he knows when I go to Parliament, I will benefit. I will have some good salary, then build a house, have this car, have that, and have these privileges, which I can never find or get as a headmaster in one government primary school somewhere. All these issues, are we addressing them, and what needs to be done to all of them, because they also help fuel the other issues like GBV, etc.
There's a lot of work to be done in this regard. It's when you're in a country where politics is the most profitable spectrum, then that country is doomed, because it means there will be no social justice. It means corruption will thrive. It means the inequalities will thrive, because again, every time government talks about a rise in GDP, economic growth and all that, they do so, and the figures can be nice. I saw the Minister of Finance, Matthew Kasaija, yes, and was saying the economy is and I'm like, okay, you say that because you're looking at the figures, you're talking quantitatively. Now, quantitative economics is very deceptive, because it looks at the figures, it looks at the generalities without paying attention to the details. And that is why we always suggest that there must be a balance between the quantitative economics and the qualitative economics. If you're doing research, then look at the quantitative and the qualitative, so that you're able, because the quantitative gives the general picture, but it is qualitative which tells the actual story, and say, okay, fine, the GDP has grown, but how much of it is in Uganda's pocket? How much of it is in my pocket? Because GDP can be misleading, because if you get Sudir, you get Mukwano, and whatever, you can find that about 20 guys are really accounting for maybe...
The Pareto principle, 20-80.
Yes. Actually, in this case, it's like 90-10. 90% of the money.
That's a new principle then.
90% of the money is being generated by 10% of the people. You get the point. So there's that inversion.
The halves and the halves.
Yes, the halves. Yes. So you have 90% of the people, therefore, being lumped together with the 10% who are far more prosperous, and then it gives a misleading figure. So we need to shift paradigms and say, let us discuss this thing qualitatively. Let us tell the actual story. How much money is in your pocket? How much is in my pocket? How much is in her pocket? That is what will paint the real picture, because we always go for generalities. Yet when you look at the income inequalities, it's very heartbreaking that the people who are literally outside the economy, you'll spend 1 month without even 1,000 shillings in your pocket. Go to the village. Guys there operate outside the economy, broadly speaking. If you like, outside the monetary economy, that he can spend one month without even 1,000 shillings. But you see, he has his garden, so he gets food from the garden. The clothes from Christmas of 5 years ago, he still wears them. The campaign T-shirt of the other election of 2011 and 2016 and 2021, he still has them. He's using them sparingly, so he hasn't needed to buy new clothes for all this time. But they're literally outside the economy. So the income inequalities, I think the economists used what they call the Gini coefficient to measure the inequalities. Say you're saying 90% the economy has grown by this, the GDP has grown by this, but where is the money actually going? Who actually has that money? So these are things that we need to have a conversation on, and it's also, so we talk about economic growth, but with social justice mainstreamed in, because then we shall begin to answer some of the questions, say, is everybody getting a piece of the pie? Is everybody benefiting from the growth? Is this growth spread across the board? Can we feel it in the north and in the west and in the east and in the central? These are things that as a country we need to have a conversation on. If we don't, we shall still stay where we are.
Our trust as Ugandans is much vested in politicians. Whenever we get into an election, we open up jobs up to about 2.3 million jobs from president to local councils. In our civil service, I think we only have less than 500,000 technical people in there. Now, the political industry employs 5-6 times the technical one, and that's where our interest is. We get to levels where we don't want to demand from Gawaya Tegule, who is in the Solicitor General's office. We don't want to demand from Sylvia, who is in the office of the DPP, but we want to put the pressure on Jagenda Semakula because he's a member of parliament or he's a councillor, a district chairperson, because we voted for him, and we even remind them and tell them, Katukurinde, we give you another 5 years because
you're coming back.
Yes, exactly. And Jagenda has all this pressure. I need to be home every weekend for Barrio, for Kwanjula, for this, for that, because I want to retain the seat. And there are these issues that are disturbing all of us, but we have a whole lot of these people that we are spending a lot of money on. What needs to be done for social justice to happen in this country? Looking at that, before I come to Sylvia.
Again, I go back to the political will, the presidential will. I think Mr. Museveni needs to appreciate these realities, and he needs to acknowledge that a lot of what is happening is undesirable, it is not sustainable, and it complicates a lot of things for almost everybody. We need to mainstream social justice into decision making. We need to make sure that even as I always talk about economic growth, we're talking about social justice, that everybody is benefiting. We need, and part of that, by the way, you talked about the political whatever, we need to narrow the political spectrum in the sense of participation in politics should be by way of people being able to speak out freely. But things like proliferating local government entities, that is more constituencies, more districts, more municipalities, more town councils. Now, these things, like I said, this is a complex conversation. If you look at it, you need time to break these things down. But if you look at the bigger picture, these are the things that complicate everything, because you have a lot of money going into the political space. And then you have a lot of competition for the political space thereafter, because that's where opportunity is. That's where free money is. I saw a Nigerian senator, you must have seen that video going around. A Nigerian senator who was donating. Now, you've seen, of course, Nigeria is Nigeria. You really can't compare Nigeria to Uganda.
They have their own things.
Yes, but this senator was donating. If you look at, he has a row of borders, like from here up to Uganda House, like just borders. Then they have these tukutukus, the ones that have, the
tukutukus.
Yes. Then there are pickups. Then there are generators. Then there are maize meals and whatever. I mean, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Even this government might be hard pressed to supply something like that, but this was one senator who's just giving out donations, preparing for his coming elections. And it's like, wow, you'd think it is a whole government that has supplied an entire district. But this one person who is doing this, but tells you that the sub-Saharan African problem is maybe the same across the board, that the political space is so... We've pampered it too much until all the money is going there, all the attention is going there at the expense of the private sector, because if the country is to progress, then you want the private sector to be bigger than the public sector, and bigger than the political sector per se, that you need to excite or to ignite or stimulate the private sector. Once it grows, then people will shift away from the politics and say, actually, it is more profitable to work in the private sector, yes, than to be in politics, and go to parliament, that become a president. I can actually make money. The guys whom you see in this parliament and whatever, it's not because they like politics, but that is where economic opportunity is. Many of them just want to be there because that's where the money is, that's where opportunity is.
The fortune is there.
Yes, if they had their way, I'm sure many of them would not be there, because they go there, they even just sleep, they do their deals, they never talk, they never do anything, they just use it to run their deals. Yes, so we need to have a paradigm shift. Now, that's a lot of effort, a lot of conversation, a long conversation, but it has to happen, and I hope that the president can be at the center of this conversation.
Thank you. Finally, from you, we just have about 4 minutes, and use 2.5 minutes, and we'll be out of studios.
Let me do my best. I think my colleague has really expounded on the issue. I want to understand, I want to believe that in Uganda here we are on the situation, on a scenario of primitive accumulation of wealth and selfish accumulation of wealth, which is part of the stages of development. But it takes a strong leadership to try and change the narrative so that we can have equalizers, equity and equality. Equity means you pull those that are really, and try and bring them to the same level, and equality, you make sure that equity affirmative action, and equality, we try and bring people almost at the same level. So how can we do this as a country? Of course, it calls to change mindset. When you look at the developed countries, the people who are in politics are already accomplished. They're just doing it as a service. But like he has said here, people in politics are looking for employment. We need to create legal frameworks, but also implement them. We need a minimum wage. You are talking about a nurse and a teacher. But because we don't have a minimum wage, you find that one teacher being much more rich than another teacher. I've looked at schools. There are pictures that have been going around. And there are students who are still studying under trees, in grass-thatched houses. So you don't expect to create equality where you have not created a framework that brings about that kind of level grounded. So we need a minimum wage law that can create some kind of unified salaries. But we also need those laws that can strengthen those that are vulnerable and maybe in that poverty level. Like the legal aid law, where people can be equally represented in courts of law, and you minimize the kind of evictions that we see. We need to go deliberate to create controls and regulation of a private actor. Like we have a lot of capitalism in Uganda, but unregulated. And that is affecting the human development because the market prices are according to what these capitalists think about. So we need also to create civic education. Civic education in a way that can help people to civic education that can help people appreciate who should be a leader. What do I expect from my leader? What should I do to bring back my leader who is not performing to that expectation? You find that people are just voting for the sake of voting without appreciating. So then finally, we need to ensure that we are committed to implementing the law as it is to reduce impunity that is going on. Whereas we are talking about, we need to make people accountable. And then those that are giving justice also need to know the responsibility they have. And many more. We can spend the whole day discussing what we can do, but we think that we can just poach points here and there that can point us in the right direction.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sylvia Nambiru, for joining us this morning. Thank you. Ndugu Gawaya Tegule. Thank you very much for having allowed to join us on Good Morning Uganda today. And well, next time we invite you again for such conversations, I think you'll be available there too. Again, Colin.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jagenda.
Thank you very much. It is 9 o'clock, and of course, we'll stop the conversation here for today. We wish you all the best, and thank you for being part of a Good Morning Uganda Extra. My name is Jagenda Semakola Ziksoka. Wishing you all the best until tomorrow again. Good morning.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Raising voices.
As a community member, I think we need to change in the way we act in response to violence against children. In my small way, I can be a leader in preventing violence in my community. I promise to work with my neighbor to create violence-free homes and communities for our children.
In this time of COVID, what is your promise to the children of Uganda? Because a violence-free childhood is everyone's right. Raising voices.
It's no secret that ICT makes learning easy.
The strides made in our field couldn't be possible without it.
And now we can watch our favorite shows.